Now it's my pleasure to introduce our panelist for today's broadcast, Larry Harding, Vice Chairman and Executive Director for Corporate Development for Radius. Frequently referenced as an expert resource for international trends in publications like the Wall Street Journal and CFO Magazine, Larry was awarded the prestigious Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award for 2013 in the Maryland region. Prior to Radius, Larry served as Vice President of International Finance for Ciena Corporation, where he managed, developed, and implemented the financial, accounting, and compliance functions for Ciena's international operations, which included over 30 overseas offices in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Larry is a licensed CPA in Massachusetts and holds a Bachelor of Science in Economics with a dual major in Finance and Accounting from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. Over to you, Larry.
Thank you very much, Ed, and thanks to everybody who's participating in today's webinar. I appreciate your taking the time out of your day. Hopefully this will be a productive period of time for all of us. So the topic for today is budgeting and planning related to overseas offices. The role that finance professionals tend to play is one that's really important. Many times we're not necessarily on the front line of making the strategic decision to go overseas, but it's our job to make sure that it goes as well as it possibly can. So I want to run through a handful of topics today and at the end open it up for any questions. So really focusing on what's the bottom line, expenses to consider when budgeting for overseas expansion. Next slide, please. So figuring out the costs for an overseas expansion, like it is for every other aspect that finance tends to touch, is a very important priority. It's a more complicated topic and exercise when going overseas than it is for many of the other different activities that we tend to monitor. Next slide, please. So first of all, why do we need to get cost estimates related to budgeting, related to expanding overseas? First of all, the whole exercise is usually a strategic decision. So having an understanding of what the actual and reliable cost estimates are going to be really at the very front end tends to justify, is this a smart, logical move for your business to make or is it not? And that's different than a lot of sort of similar approaches that finance tends to weigh on. It allows you budgeting, good budgeted numbers allow you to look at different opportunities, whether it's different countries that you may be considering, whether you're going overseas or not at all. And it also helps you set up the P&L goals, which is really important to hold different parts of the project accountable for delivering what they're supposed to do, you know, not only on time, but within expected return constraints. Next slide, please. So the issue with expanding overseas is more than in many other endeavors. It's the hidden costs and the things that you wouldn't logically think about or know about, oftentimes things that are different than we're used to here in the U.S., that from a budgeting and planning perspective really can rise up and strike you and really create a lot of challenges and problems, not only for you, but for the whole global expansion effort. Next, please. So we tried to categorize a handful of different buckets that some of these surprises tend to run into. The first off is most of the places that U.S. businesses are going to be going overseas tend to just be more expensive markets, whether it's, you know, the strength of the overseas currency versus the dollar, whether it's just we typically go to pretty hot markets overseas when we're doing our global expansions. The places that we tend to go to quite often are expensive places. The other issue is the basics like staffing, services, office space really tend to vary not just from country to country, but actually different regions in the country. So it can be difficult if we're not overly familiar with the places that we're going to or thinking of going to, you know, to understand just how variable a lot of these things can be from place to place. I think we're all pretty well aware there are a lot of tax and regulatory hurdles and compliance issues that really need to be understood, not just so that you can comply with them, but also so that you can, you know, keep track of the actual budgets and estimates and actual costs. And then there are just a lot of hidden costs, especially in certain different markets, things that you wouldn't ordinarily ever know about or expect. even if you're very well versed in helping an organization go overseas, let alone if this may be the first time. So there's a bunch of different categories that exist that we really need to be mindful of.